So speaking of allyship, how can coworkers and management be allies in places of employment?
Yeah. One thing is interesting that it's important to remember is like, we can call ourselves an ally and we can give ourselves an ally pin and whatnot, but that's not actually how it works. The idea around it, rather than it being a noun, it's a verb. Sometimes we even want to lean into places of how can I be an accomplice? How can I be an accomplice to what you need to thrive in this workplace, right? Whether that's as a manager, that's being mindful of the different ways that people work. And so they don't have 8 a.m. meetings on Mondays. I mean, this could be really nuanced. I had a colleague that was talking about she had fired somebody but they were really great. They could just never get there on time. And then it was in retrospect that she realized there was a single mother who couldn't get there on time because as a manager, she was holding a meeting at a time that made it impossible for her to show up.
Right.
Right. And so these are other aspects around diversity and around inclusion and belonging that we can think about. So how can I be an accomplice? I think a lot of times what it means is being informed, but it can be tricky because, and again, I think this goes to boundaries. Being informed, having a general understanding and building up trust, and then having the awareness to know when to get in the way, right? When to say, hey, you shouldn't ask them that question.
Yeah, that's not appropriate.
That's not appropriate. Or they told you their pronouns are they, them. You got to use their pronouns, So that's kind of getting in the way. When to get out of the way. So there might be, again, that kind of thing I was talking about earlier. I might not be the best one on this one. I don't live this reality. There's somebody that does, that's going to say it more eloquently, that's going to get to it better, and they're ready. They're ready. So you got to recognize when to get out of the way, know?
Yeah.
And so I think that's about kind of reading the room in those ways. And then the other part about it is just it always comes back to this platinum rule, treating people the way they want to be treated, which means that you have to really get to know them individually.
Yes.
But it also might mean if you have a Muslim colleague, people practice Islam in numerous ways. So staying really curious, even though you might know a little bit of something about this religion. And then just being nuanced, right? So right now in Ramadan, what time am I holding meetings? Can I be flexible and know that maybe folks need to go home at 3? Because that's a long day.
Yeah.
Right? It's a long day. And then trust people to do the right thing. Like, have a degree of integrity with how we're going to try and meet them where they're at. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. In our organization, we have mothers and we have almost stay-at-home father, and we have, people from all different walks of life. And so, yeah, it's a little trickier to negotiate when we all meet, right? But we make it work, and it's just we actually ended up creating like an institutional calendar of like when I'm out and when I'm not available, so we can all kind of look at it and figure it out. And everybody has priorities in lives, and I think the key really is that curiosity you're talking about of getting to know people on an individual level as humans. And I think that's a fundamental thing.
And then also like trying to ask, like, when do you have good flow, right?
Yes.
When do you have good flow?
Yeah.
When are things hard? Like what season are you in right now, whether it's with a project or individually? And I think the thing about these things that seem universal, well, why would I be thinking about whether someone's a caregiver, right? Or their marital status? Diversity or thinking about allyship and stuff is only around these big race, these big chunks of identity, but it's not. I mean, that's actually usually
inclusion is inclusion,
right? And that's what we're usually managing a lot more. Then when you want to layer in other things, if I'm a single parent, right, and a solo income earner, and I'm a person of color, right, and I don't have U.S. citizenship, like what are all the things that are layering into that for me and how I'm navigating systems or just showing up as an individual? And those can be the stressful sides of it, and those can be like, oh, look at all these different perspectives and ways I might be thinking about a transportation system, right? That I might be able to problem solve around something,
right?
Because I have all these intersecting parts of my identity.
So speaking of your friend who, in hindsight, realized this was a single mother and I got rid of someone who really was a benefit to us, but I didn't realize. Did she course correct? Did she go back to the person?
Yeah.
Okay.
And this is somebody, this happened like probably 2 decades ago, but a leader in the nonprofit space and like some really hard nonprofit space, and absolutely course corrected and shared this with me as an up and coming leader, and also shared it with me as a fellow white woman to pay attention to some of the ways that it might not be racism, but it could be tied into that. It can be perceived as racism. It could definitely have the impact of because this also was a dynamic where this was happening again and again with women of color within the organization. And one of the key factors around that was bus times and transportation. Yep. So this all does get caught up within race and our racial, the dynamics around that and perceptions. And so then sometimes, though, it's just about a system and a solution build, because that other stuff isn't going to go away. So she absolutely did course correct. And it was interesting, too. I mean, it did have to do with, like, if people can get to your job, however they get to their job, that's great. But if they're using public transportation, right, and I don't use public transportation, can I have awareness of what that is? So I'm timing when we do programming or events and whatnot. And then, of course, though, that's going to have an impact around socioeconomic status and class and other factors, too. Yeah.
It almost seems like a conversation could have been had of like, so what's happening? Rather than just fire someone, what's happening with you?
Yep.
I try at least once a year. Usually it's an ongoing thing, but at minimum once a year, where it's like, so how's it going? How do you like your job? Are you getting enough hours? Do you like what you're working on?
That's good.
What's happening in your life? You know, just because I want to know that people are still invested, and if there's a problem, how can I solve it? Yeah. So I still think we have a ways to go and a lot we could do better, but like I just try to just approach it on the personal level. So,
absolutely. And a lot of times it's around a question. We often expect people to set their boundaries through them telling us with a statement, but oftentimes it's somebody asking a question that we get a better understanding of the room that we're all in or not.
Yeah.